Hi everyone, Sid here back in the bathroom. Today's video might be a little long and my notes here are a little spotty, so hopefully it won't be too rambly, but I think I'll do a decent job by the end. Today I would like to open up yet another hot topic that I alluded to during the Sanders-Trump comparison video, which is the topic of immigration, and more specifically the migrant crisis. So before I get into sharing my thoughts, well, I guess that's what I'm doing now. So what I like to do when discussing topics that are controversial, especially in public like I'm doing now, I like to make the conversation as easy as possible for myself. First of all, I like to pick my battles, and when I do choose to engage, I try to make my thoughts as easy as possible to discuss. So for example, let's take 9/11, which is actually quite relevant to this topic. Like, if you believe the official story of 9/11 as presented, that 19 terrorists with box cutters and fire-resistant passports who hate the US for their freedoms decided to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes, yada yada yada. Frankly, I don't know what to tell you. But you can use the official story of 9/11 to make all the relevant points. That 9/11 was the result of decades of interventionist foreign policy and was therefore blowback for that interventionist foreign policy, and subsequently used as a lie to get the US military into Iraq to even further destabilize the area. Bada bing, bada boom, 9/11 kind of makes sense. No need to get into arguments on the burning temperature of steel, or whether or not burning jet fuel can melt steel, or whether or not there was nanothermite on the crash site and whatever. So in a similar vein, when talking about the migrant crisis, which is more relevant in Europe, but is affecting the whole world really. There are a lot of angles to take when discussing this issue. Some of them valid, some of them not so valid. And obviously, wow, this is a little runny. And obviously, there are ways of addressing people who don't necessarily think it's a good idea. Also, some valid, some not so valid. But the way that I see it, and the one note that I will constantly hit, is to not focus so much on Islam and how many of them are terrorists and how many of them support ISIS. When discussing this, I choose to focus entirely on Sharia law. So, to sum up my position, I don't want Sharia law anywhere near me. And if you care about gay rights and women's rights, you don't want Sharia law anywhere near you either. And I don't even see how it would be even remotely controversial to say that. However, and I will add this caveat, it's very important. Abrahamists in general, they tend to cherry pick. Abrahamism is my umbrella term for the 3 religions that worship the God of Abraham, i.e. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So yeah, like Christians in general, most of the Christians I know, they like to walk around as if the Old Testament doesn't exist. And I don't know much about Judaism or Islam, but I know that most of the Jews that I know are not Orthodox Jews, which suggests some level of cherry picking. And I know that not all Islam supports Sharia law. But that does lead to the question, how many Muslims do support Sharia law? And the thing is, I researched it really quickly. The reason it was quick is because I found wildly disparate numbers. And the smallest number I found was 19%. The biggest number I found was 67%. And I think that the 19% number, I can use it to make most relevant points, especially considering that it's self-reporting, which means the real number is certainly bigger. But the bottom line is, if you take 5 random Muslims from anywhere around the world, and I even think this was in the US, this 19% number, but let's generalize it to the whole world. So you take 5 random Muslims from around the world, and statistically, at least one of them thinks it's a good idea for gay people to get whipped, and also thinks it's a good idea to kill any of the other 4 who converts away from Islam. That is not something that I find acceptable, and again, I don't see how it's in any way controversial to say this, and I think that, and this is something that I do mentally ever since I fell on that 19% number. When we talk about X number of migrants on their way to whatever country, I divide that number by 5 and say, well, at least that many people think it's a good idea for gays to get whipped. And the bottom line is, and this is another important question, which is, who's doing the vetting? You know, especially since it's based on self-reporting, if you're a Muslim who supports Sharia law, and you're fleeing your native country on your way to Canada, the US, or Europe or whatever, and some bureaucrat in a suit asks you if you support Sharia law, of course your incentive is going to be to say no, if they even ask. I don't know how the vetting is done, but I know that the person who is doing the vetting is going to get paid no matter what, and I don't trust people who rely on coercion to make these complex decisions that will affect a lot of people. And it's funny too, because I'm reminded of some comments that I've made in casual conversations with people. In a free society, in the kind of free society that I would want to see, Sharia law would be a complete non-issue, because I can't see someone who wasn't born into it and raised into it choosing Sharia law if there were other ways, other options of dispute resolution and justice attribution, let's call it that, available to them within that region. And another anecdote, something I mentioned in conversation with my mother a couple months ago, is that this whole migrant crisis and you know, ISIS and the quagmire that currently exists in the Middle East, you can draw a pretty direct line between the current situation and 9/11 going back through the Iraq War, and even that would be short-sighted. Because, as I mentioned, even the official story as presented would make 9/11 the result of blowback from decades of interventionist foreign policy, which basically exacerbated since. You know, whether you believe in the official story or you believe that Dick Cheney and George Bush were in some smoke-filled room going on the morning of 9/11, it really doesn't make much difference. So I think that covers most of what I wanted to say. I guess it was shorter than I thought it would be. So before wrapping up, I just want to mention, to repeat the things that I said when alluding to this topic in the Trump-Sanders head-to-head video, which is, bar none, the best thing we can do for Syrian and other migrants is to stop creating more of them. And I'm not sure if this is the second best thing we can do for them, but it's way up there. And that would be to relocate them within the Middle East. It would be more efficient and cheaper, which means you could help more people for the same amount of money, more bang for your buck. And there would be far less danger of having a large amount of people use the democratic process to recreate their home country within the West and basically implement Sharia law, which I think is absolutely to be avoided. So on that note, thank you very much for watching this video. Please like and share, leave your comments. I kind of skipped around a lot within these notes, but hopefully it made sense. And you'll find links to my Tumblr and Twitter accounts right under here. Please subscribe to me on YouTube. That would help me out a lot. And thank you very much. So you take care, and I'll see you soon.